Hi, welcome to my video on my observation of Mrs. Dorico, the social studies special educator, she can't speak, educator, who mainly works with the ninth graders. She actually goes into Miss Burke's room during fourth period where she works with her individually. However, I observed first period, which is more, for lack of the better term, like this self-contained classroom. So she only had about 5 or so students in there with significant speech and language disorders who had trouble spelling and reading. So first thing I noticed when I walked in the room was this. It's going to be inverted because it's a video, but the first thing I walked into the room was she had this on the board. So these here are all of the letters that she had, including all the vowels were highlighted. And then down here, she had like wha, ch, sh, k, and then endings. And then on the other side, she had like conjugating words like ing, ink, ong, unk, all that makes separate sounds. So she is working on them of combining these words. So to start off, she had them come in and get their magnet boards. So the kids actually have this on their own personalized magnet board, which is really awesome because then she can just bring that up and use that. However, she just kind of like wrote it down on the whiteboard she had up front. So they were working on 2 sounds. Specifically, that day they started with the U, the E, and the I vowels, the consonants of th, and v, so F and V, what they call the welded sounds, the ild, onk, and ung sounds. And she uses the Wilson Language Training Corporation. That is the curriculum that Stephen Decatur has in place. So with her 9th graders, she starts off with quick drill. So that's their warm-up, so working with that. And then she'll do the teach and review. So this is stuff that they already should have been going over, which like blending sounds, 3 sounds, and then bringing in the ict. That's what they were working on, ect, ict. And then high frequency, like each and world were 2 big words that they did, which I do want to add that I did this along with them. Like I had my iPad and I was walking around and looking and everything. And I was also trying to do them, and I actually got some wrong. So that was a little humbling that I got some wrong. But anyway, and then they worked on blending. So they would do mid, rub, and lash. Those were like some of their beginning words. And then she would ask midst. Like they already did mid, they just had to add the tst, which some kids struggled. One of the kids actually who sat in the back would kind of like look to see his partners and then do it, but like I would kind of like go and like stand in between because it's like, we gotta work on it, bro. But yeah, so that's kind of what they did. And once they moved on from that, they moved on to stricter word dictation. They have what's called nonsense words. I really hated that. I know that's like a thing. I really hated it. So they did word elements. So they did struct, fishes, tract, like some of those word elements. They did some of the real words like stress, script, tempt, prompt, and scruff. Those were their real words. And then they had what's called nonsense words. So that was scret, SCRET, strang, which I feel like that could be a real world, but real word, a real word, and strimp. Strang is STRANG, and then strimp. So that's very STRIMP. So also P. I'll ask Alex about that. And then she asked them to do sentences. So she would ask them to write sentences. Josh strums the strings in a band. And then like stra, they've been working on the stra. Ing, they've been working on ing. The next sentence was, we must scrimp to save cash for the trip. Which, strimp, their fake word strimp, but now it's just scrimp. So it's, so strang, string, like just changing some of that around. The next sentence was, go put a sprig of dill in a clam broth. Why a clam broth, I don't know. That sounds really gross. And then she would do the same thing with the next group of students, which was a smaller group. It went a lot faster, so I think those are the more like high-level kids. She started with the more low-level kids, which took a little longer, and then the high-level kids came in, and that meant a little bit faster. And then they also did, and that's like her first period. It's just, she's the first group come in, does the lesson, second group come in, does the lesson again. So some other words from the other lesson were ring, string, lit, split, like all these things, and still using that Wilson Language Training Program. I wrote down some other really cool things. I learned a lot, especially about dictation, everything like that, especially me, where I kind of do stumble over my words, how a student with a speech and language disorder, or even just a student with a specific learning disorder, can honestly really struggle. I mean, just in this video alone, I've had to repeat and really enunciate the words that I'm saying. So they're doing, sorry, I can't read my handwriting, which is really depressing. But yeah. So in terms of the lesson, that's what happened. I learned, like I said, I learned a lot about how this encoding and the decoding then turning into encoding, and then eventually they move on to comprehension later on. I didn't get to witness that, but it's that sort of, okay, now we're going to decode, then we're going to encode, and then we're going to comprehend, that sort of structure. It's very different in the like self-contained, the separated classroom. It's very different from learning about imperialism and industrialization. It's a very, sometimes you just don't realize that sometimes the words, when you're talking about industrial, like imagine a kid who's trying to now just spell the word tract, trying to spell and read industrialization like that. Like, I don't think I've ever really comprehended how students can really be on different levels and you may not know. And especially one of my kids in one of my periods, I know gets help from Mrs. Dorico with writing and reading. And for him, maybe he needs a lot more help than I've realized. So especially the accommodations and differences I've seen with the unstructured routine, with the wordings, with that sort of structure is very interesting from what I found. The observation definitely changed my views on just how vast all the students are. Then again, these are 9th graders, so not my 11th graders, but I know you said it, we can't always work miracles, so I guarantee there's still kids struggling in my placement as well. It definitely makes me want to learn more about my students, to make sure that if they are struggling like that, that I do everything I can to help, that I really do sometimes enunciate what I'm saying so that when they're trying to spell things, it might be a little bit easier. I think I would have to observe that sort of setting more to completely have a full-rounded understanding of how I would do that. But I mean, in Mr. Kurtz's classroom, we don't really have that many students with IEPs. As far as I'm aware, I think there's maybe only 1 or 2. And there's very little accommodations that I'm aware of that I've seen. So having that and then going in Mr. Rico's classroom and seeing all those different accommodations, the letters, the magnet boards, the sounding out, it's very vast and very different from what I see in my general education classroom. Overall, it was really interesting. I did enjoy it. And I'd like to see more maybe in terms of content. So obviously with spelling, but how does that transform into content? So maybe observing Miss Burke's classroom during 4th period would be really interesting that I'd like to see. Thank you.